Hello everyone, I'm Autobot Sonic the Telltale Gamer, bringing latest everything Telltale games, Transformers, and more. So today we are going to be looking at the third episode of Transformers Cyberverse Season 2, subtitled Power to Spark, which is called The Visitor. Now, after the incredible but somewhat flawed episode that we had last time with Episode 2, Bad Moon Rising, where we just, wow, there's just a lot happening in that episode. We're kind of slowing things down now with like a more traditional Cyberverse Season 1 hijinks episode with The Visitor. And contrary to the title of this video, the aforementioned Visitor doesn't actually play that big of a role in this episode, which kind of confuses me as to why this episode was titled The Visitor. I honestly think maybe they should have saved this for an episode where the said Visitor plays a much more prominent role in it, but that's just me. In the time though, compared to the absolute carnage we saw in the last episode of Bad Moon Rising, I think this is a nice filler episode just to alleviate some of the tension from the two action-packed episodes we saw last time with Episode 1, Sea of Tranquility, and Episode 2, Bad Moon Rising. But it's not without a little bit of cringiness, but overall I can definitely forgive it a lot more due to the fact that we're just riding off the heels of two intense episodes, so nice to have some lightheartedness to break up the tension. So we're going to go ahead and everything this episode did right and what it did wrong. So this episode actually puts a big spotlight on Wheeljack for the most part. It mostly focuses on Wheeljack and Bumblebee, but it's nice to see that Wheeljack finally gets a chance to shine, as we've seen him throughout a couple flashbacks throughout the entirety of Season 1, plus he played a somewhat major part in the last two episodes with helping the Optimus and the rest of the Autobots stop first the Planet Smasher that Shockwave created, then stopping the moon from crashing into Earth. So it's nice to see Wheeljack take like a more lighthearted episode focus, and also show off more of his like mad scientist persona that we've seen in bits and pieces throughout this season and Season 1. So basically it starts off with Wheeljack talking to Optimus, basically showcasing all these different objects and like gadgets that he's been creating since their time on the arc, and the standout one is this one called Hyperfuel, which he states he can use to accelerate the arc's engines with enough force to destroy the volcano that's currently trapped in and leave Earth, which Optimus is all for. But when he realizes that Wheeljack's drone goes into like an overloading sense because of the fact that of how hyper the Hyperfuel is, Optimus tells Wheeljack to work on it more as get started. Meanwhile, Bumblebee is being checked on by Ratchet, who believes he was hallucinating seeing Cheetor at the end of the last episode, Bad Moon Rising, and Bumblebee is so adamant, though, about making sure that what he saw was true, so he ends up basically going to Teletran X, wanting to ask if he can help him find Cheetor. And there is, like, I gotta say, seeing Teletran X now not be such an in constant force in Cyberverse compared to how Season 1, where he was just constantly butting into every conversation he and Windblade had, constantly annoying her with the whole knock cruise shtick. Having him actually become like the actual main AI of the arc now, and just sort of be more of an omniscient presence throughout all of Cyberverse, at least on the arc, that definitely makes me more tolerant of him. And also it gets a pretty funny laugh out of me here when Bumblebee is trying to explain what he saw on the moon to Teletran X, and Teletran X comes to the conclusion that Bumblebee saw a banana, and then he goes into this whole spiel about describing all the different kinds of bananas, and literally we get this really funny jump cut of while Teletran X is explaining this, Bumblebee just walks away because he has no interest in talking to Teletran X, and that just sums up perfectly my thoughts on Teletran X, his character, all the way back in Season 1, and it's all strengthened by Jeremy Levy's performance as Bumblebee. He does a great job of just showing how done he is with Teletran X. But after that, he goes around the rest of the arc, basically trying to talk to other Autobots about if they know anything about tracking a cheetah. He goes to Hot Rod first, who still doesn't believe him, then Prowl, then even Rack and Ruin, who we saw back in Episode 1 of Season 2, and even I think it was McAdams in... No, it wasn't. It was Sabotage. That was the last episode we saw Rack and Ruin in back in Season 1. And then finally, even though he keeps going to all these Autobots, can't get anything, until he finally goes to RC, where she mentions how she's seen a lot of spotted animals. And we get this funny thing where apparently RC's been pretty busy with her time on Earth, taking pictures of all the local wildlife on Earth. She's got pictures of giraffes and other stuff before she finally shows Bumblebee a picture of a cheetah she took a picture with, and that's what now Bumblebee knows what a cheetah is, he decides to go to Wheeljack, and who's with Grimlock at the time, asking him if he can give him some sort of cheetah hunting device so that he can locate where Cheetor is, thinking that it's tied to the Allspark in some way. And while Wheeljack is helping Bumblebee out with this, Grimlock is left unattended and ends up finding the hyperfuel that Wheeljack is, and thinking, Wheeljack thinking it's like some high-grade energon that Grimlock can serve as some victory party that he plans to host with all the Autobots. He drinks a bit of it, but it ends up overcharging him to the point where it forces him to transform into Dinobot mode, and then he ends up, to make matters worse, he ends up finding like a huge barrel full of hyperfuel and basically just sticks his head in like a dog and eats the whole thing. And that caused, and now if you were thinking what I'm thinking, this reminded me originally of the season 1 episode Transformers Prime Stronger Faster, when Ratchet ends up making that synthetic energon as a way to like combat the fact that energon is in such low demand. In that episode, Ratchet takes it, but then he ends up basically creating like the energon equivalent of steroids, where he ends up becoming this roided out, like super strong Autobot, but also like really ignorant and aggressive Autobot, to the point where like he starts getting alienated by all the other Autobots, and even like gets into some trouble there. That's what I thought was going to happen with this, and I'd be down for that. But instead, it just turns Grimlock into Sonic the Hedgehog over here. Can't stop running all over the Wheeljack side, and then just runs through the arc, causing all kinds of mayhem. So Bumblebee, Wheeljack, and Windblade all head out to try and stop Grimlock from just causing havoc and damaging the arc. And it's nice to get a few funny little things here. One point, Grimlock tackles into Prowl, who's testing out some new gun, causing it to go like shooting all over the place. He ends up toppling over a big wall of just, like supply crates that Rack and Ruin have set up, but eventually Wheeljack attempts to stop Grimlock by shooting him with a magnetism gun, which basically sticks him to the wall of the arc. But even that isn't enough to stop Grimlock, and he just basically keeps running stuck onto the wall of the arc, and ends up even causing Windblade and Hot Rod to stick onto him. So eventually Windblade proposes that Grimlock heads outside of the arc, because even though Grimlock is running, he still realizes that what he's doing is wrong, but he just can't stop his body from running. So Windblade tries to propose to Grimlock to go run out of the arc so that he doesn't cause any more damage to it. And as he's going there, Wheeljack and Bumblebee try to cut him off and try to find a way to stop him, when Bumblebee grabs one of Wheeljack's guns he's carrying and ends up firing at Grimlock, hoping it will stop him. But instead of stopping him, it ends up being a black hole gun that Bumblebee ends up shooting, and creates a black hole behind them. And the force is strong enough to still, even though the black hole is sucking them all in, it's still not enough to keep Grimlock from running, who's now running in place. But eventually Hot Rod is pulled off Grimlock, looking as if he's going to be sucked into the black hole. But just before he is, Optimus comes in with a force field gun that Wheeljack was showing at the beginning of this episode, and basically uses it, shoots once at the black hole to trap it, and another one at Grimlock, trapping him and Windblade inside the force field. So basically Grimlock just running around like a giant hamster ball, basically. So after that, Optimus hands the force field gun back to Wheeljack, basically banning the hyperfuel plan at all. And then Wheeljack tells Windblade and Grimlock that he'll be worn off the hyperfuel in about a day's time. So Windblade and Grimlock have to unfortunately stay in the force field for the remainder of the day. So now that that goes to the ending of this episode, where Bumblebee and Hot Rod are outside of the arc, and Bumblebee ends up seeing Cheetor again, looking out at him. This time Hot Rod sees him as well, and the two of them decide to give chase to Cheetor. Bumblebee and Hot Rod end up chasing Cheetor through the mountains in the range outside the arc, eventually leading to inside a cavern, where Hot Rod gets ahead of Bumblebee and drives into the cave. But seemingly when Bumblebee gets there, Hot Rod and Cheetor are nowhere to be found, and just a huge wall of rubble separating him from Hot Rod and Cheetor. So Bumblebee is totally confused as to where Hot Rod and Cheetor went, and thinks that no one will believe where he was. So he then decides to go back to the arc, and that's pretty much where the episode ends. Now, as for the cons on this episode, again, like, this is a very, very lighthearted episode compared to the other two. I mean, you can't exactly go from this to just like a whole season of just death after death after death after death. So even if Cyberverse does plan to kill off more characters over the course of seasons 2, 3, and 4, I do think that it is right to go ahead and make some lighthearted filler episodes to take things up. But the only thing is just there's so much going on in this episode that the point of the episode kind of gets lost in itself. Like, the episode title is called The Visitor, but it's not really about the Visitor. Sure, there's a side plot of Bumblebee trying to convince all the Autobots that he saw Cheetor and tries to learn what he is, but the primary focus of this episode is about Bumblebee and Bumblebee, Hot Rod, Windblade, and Wheeljack trying to stop Grimlock from just causing havoc all over the arc with the hyperfuel. To me, I feel like this episode would have benefited a lot more without that plot, and instead just focus on Bumblebee doing more research into figuring out who Cheetor is and what potentially he could be doing, seeking Bumblebee out. And we did definitely get that for at least half this episode, but the other half just being Wheeljack and him stopping Grimlock from causing hijinks, I definitely think that kind of takes away from the point of this episode, because that plot feels more important to the episode than the namesake of this episode being the Visitor, with the Visitor being Cheetor. The fact that Cheetor sort of takes a backseat in this episode, even though the episode is basically named after him, just feels a little bit weird in my opinion. But it's not the hijinks, like the lightheartedness isn't bad. It just feels awkward that got the focus of this episode, in my opinion. And so, that was my review of Transformers Cyberverse Season 2, Power of the Spark, Episode 3, The Visitor. If I had to rank this episode, I would probably give it an 8 out of 10. A solid episode, definitely after riding off the coattails of Bad Moon Rising and Sea of Tranquility. Not every episode is going to be super dark and like disturbing to that degree, so it's nice to have lightheartedness break it up, but at the same time, the fact that Grimlock's plot overshadows the namesake of this episode which is being Bumblebee learning more about Cheetor, just rubs me the wrong way and feels like it takes away from this episode. But overall though, a decent episode. So that's going to be it for this review. I'll be back soon with Episode 4, Bring Me the Spark of Optimus Prime. If you like this review, be sure to like, comment, and of course subscribe, and I will see you guys later. Take it away, Bumblebee.
Bumblebee out.
And